Toronto police have their suspect, but they're still looking for a motive. That's how the CNN article, linked below, started in their coverage of Alek Minassian allegedly plowing through a crowd of civilians, killing 10 people. Minassian has been charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. Already, red pill aficionados are waiting for more information on the 25-year-old, wondering whether he fits the model of so many other mass killers who happen to be young men. That is, being somewhere on the autism spectrum, suffering father absence, and having a history of being bullied, all factors that tend to be present in mass killing scenarios with some regularity. We saw it with shooters Adam Lanza and Dylan Roof, and again with Nicholas Cruz. But of course, fake news outlets like CNN don't have much use for information that might be helpful if it gets in the way of clickbait, especially the kind that pushes a leftist agenda. And to get their clickbait, all they had to do was go to the alleged killer's Facebook page. Here, I'll read you the passage from the article. Investigators found a Facebook account they believe belongs to Minassian, CNN law enforcement analyst Josh Campbell said. A message posted on the account earlier Monday read, "All hail the Supreme Gentleman Elliot Roger." Campbell said investigators believe the post refers to the man who killed 6 and injured 14 in a drive-by shooting and vehicle ramming attack near the University of California's Santa Barbara campus in 2014. Roger later died from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Investigators said Roger was motivated to carry out his attack by a personal grievance related to his immersion in the extremist ideological subculture of men's rights activists who believe women don't actually want gender equality and have been brainwashed by feminist propaganda. That's what they wrote. They being Michelle Krupa, Holly Yan, and Paul P. Murphy, who all bylined on the article. Look, I guess the first thing to do is to get the biggest lie they told out of the way. No investigator ever said that Roger was motivated to carry out his attack by a personal grievance related to his immersion in the extremist ideological subculture of men's rights activists. The trio of fake news manufacturers on the confabulated news network just lied about it. Elliot Roger wasn't subbed to any MRA or MGTOW YouTube channels. There is no evidence he participated in or even visited any of our forums ever. Roger was an incel or involuntary celibate. That means he was rejected sexually by women and construed that to mean he was a victim of some sort or another. From what we know, he spent time at the now-defunct PUAHate.com before going on his killing spree, all of which is to say that Roger was not even remotely connected to MRAs. He was, like many of the other killers, on the autism spectrum and suffered from father absence, but I don't think CNN wants me to make too big a deal about that. They don't want actual facts to cloud their narrative that there is a connection between advocating for men and mass murder. And they're not the only ones. The porcine, mendacious, and intellectually flatulent David Futrelle, writing for the fashion and beauty rag Elle, goes even further in painting the false picture. In his article, linked, he writes, and I quote, "The basic proposition, at once chilling and faintly ludicrous, might as well be the motto of the incel movement as a whole. Incels are an offshoot of the larger male supremacy movement whose penchant for wildly misogynistic speech and violent actions landed them on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of official hate groups this year." Unquote. I'll give Futrelle credit for one thing. As far as efficient writing goes, he can pack more lies per paragraph than most seasoned propagandists. Incels are not an offshoot of the men's rights movement, which, by the way, is not a male supremacy movement. But since I can't possibly cover all of Futrelle's mendacious claims, I'll just stick with the connection between incels and MRAs he fabricated. To my knowledge, this bit of agitprop goes back in origin to Elliot Rodgers' killing spree and was first manufactured by the Daily Kos, linked. Note with Kos, CNN, and Futrelle, none offer a single shred of evidence proving the connection. Indeed, all the evidence available demonstrates a clear separation of these groups. Incels are no more an offshoot of the men's movement than the men's movement is an offshoot of feminism. Propagandists like Futrelle know this, just as they know for certain that they're sending their readers on a wild goose chase in trying to understand why these tragedies happen. The victims of these killings, especially the women, are just bodies for people like Futrelle to stand on while clouding the issues with disinformation. And since the fake news machine will continue to mislead the public about the growing body count, it is on the red pill community to look for answers to this that are intellectually honest. And since we don't have the resources of places like CNN, we are left to relying on our thinking caps and a little common sense. Well, the internet helps a lot too. Linked below, you'll find an article that I discovered after I had already started writing this talk. It has one of Alek Minassian's former classmates who had with him attended a special education class for students with autism. Let's see. Adam Lanza, Dylan Roof, Nicholas Cruz, Elliot Rodger, and Alek Minassian. All mass killers, all autistic, and I will bet you dollars to donuts that before all the information rises to the surface that we will find out that Minassian suffered some degree of father absence and had likely been bullied at some point. Thanks to hacks like Futrelle and ideological news outlets like CNN, the general population won't find out about this. And for his part, David Futrelle is doing everything he can to goad more abused, autistic young men into killing women so he can use it to further his narrative. It's not like it's him that will pay the price for it after all. Probably the only reason some incel would run Futrelle down with a car would be because the incel was afraid of running out of gas trying to drive around him. But alas, I digress. Rather than dwell on the dirtiest pig in the pen, I suggest we use the information to speculate in a more intelligent way about what is actually happening. I would venture a guess to say that if the group of men who identify as incel actually pose a greater risk of violence than the average man, it may be because incels are much more likely to be on the autism spectrum than the average man. Certainly, the lack of social skills that contributes to being sexually rejected is a possible indicator of autism, and so too, quite frankly, is their tendency to view themselves as victims with grievances. To take the pangs of social rejection they regularly experience and turn it into rage or retribution. Mind you, and I shouldn't have to say this, there are a lot of brilliant young men on the spectrum who neither fail with women or see themselves as victims. Nor should I have to say that my point in bringing autism into the discussion is not to create bad stereotypes of those on the spectrum. The intent is to point to a group who may find tangible benefit if we view them more compassionately and with a higher priority on being informed than on being judgmental. But we have to deal with facts here. There is a noticeable number of autistic mass killers. And this is something we are well advised to pay attention to because the incidence of autism is rising. And I don't mean just a little. Its rise is incredibly steep and alarming. Linked below. And of course, there's the question of what to do. What do we do with the information that there's a clear tendency for young male mass killers to be on the spectrum and to have a history of social rejection, father absence, and being bullied that may manifest as a motive for revenge? Well, we could use it to create a threat narrative focused on men's rights activists and or MGTOW. At least that'll keep the asshats and idiots entertained for a while. People who can think need a different level of information. Also, some of us actually care about what is happening to these victims, and yes, what we can do to work with potential perpetrators to help prevent these tragic incidents. One option I find fascinating is to encourage incels to find social connections among MGTOW and MRAs. That's the irony of all this. Rather than being an offshoot of either MRAs or MGTOWs, incels appear to be gravitating to a philosophy that is nearly an exact opposite of what you find in MRA MGTOW circles. Where incel encourages a victim identity, MRA and MGTOW encourage autonomy and personal agency. Of course, if we want to get pie in the sky about it, we could do some other really attractive things with young men on the spectrum, like rolling out the red carpet for fathers to stay active in their lives. By warning people that a single mother with an autistic boy is like chain smoking when you're genetically predisposed to lung cancer. Things are very likely to go wrong. But of course, that stuff isn't going anywhere. We can't even get the media or the scurrilous hacks that make up the media to accept that MRA, MGTOW, PUA, and incel are all very different things. So in the end, expect more mass killings, more pathetic attempts to use corrupt ideology and Marxist agendas to explain them, more attacks on MRAs, MGTOW, and anyone else who happens to be vocal about the cancer we've come to call feminism. I'll be here too to tell a small group of thinkers what really happened. And that is it for this talk. As always, I do hope you've enjoyed, even if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.